All right, we're a week into Georgia's 2024 practices. What have we learned? Where are the concerns coming into this season? Where are people at Georgia? Uh, excited? Where are they concerned? Let's talk about this because we're a week into it. And honestly, there's been a fair amount of practices that have been seen by the public or the media so far. And I think the biggest thing that's jumping out right now to people is the depth at running back, not just the skill. Of course, they're very skilled, but the skill level coupled with the depth. This is a group that I think can go a slew of running backs deep. That is not necessarily something that people I think nationally were penciling in. I mean, you get ETN on campus, yeah, that's the headline, but it's everything else. Branson Robinson, you've got. I mean, again, I talked about this a lot. When Cash Jones is going to be like an afterthought in a way. He made a lot of plays for Georgia last season, not just on special teams, South Carolina game, the Florida State. Anyway, Nate Frazier, Dwight Phillips. There's a lot of guys who have caught the eyeball of people watching. So I think the running backs are something that's sort of jumped out to people. You lose Ra Thomas before the season starts because of him getting kicked off the team. Wide receivers are going to have to continue to keep moving forward in a big way. But I think so that's concerning. You're losing a guy who was, I think, their fourth biggest receiver last year. The good news for the good news about losing Ra is he was not overly productive a season ago. The bad news is he could have been productive in 2024, but you just cannot have that kind of action in your organization. It's unacceptable. I think there are two other sort of concerns. One of them might be a legitimate concern. One might not. I think the one that is a legitimate concern, and we won't know this until they play, is the defensive line. The linebackers are loaded up. They are probably the linebackers are just really good, and but they need to be made better by the play of the defensive line for Georgia. So when you talk to folks, it depends again on their view of the world, but there's some folks that feel like the defensive line has ratcheted up a level. They're a little bit faster, I guess you could say. Twitchier would probably be the better term. I don't know. I think you can't really tell that this early in the season. I thought there was one thing that Glenn Schumann, Georgia's defensive coordinator, talked about yesterday as far as the defensive line. I want to read this because this is actually very important. He said, "We're still in the infancy of pads. I think that we're going to really see the defensive line take the next step as we continue to have more padded practices. There's a lot of other positions where you can benefit from non-padded practices in terms of executing assignments, covering people, and things of that nature." Here's the kicker. You only really get highly skilled at your craft up front and develop by putting the pads on and striking blockers and feeling 700 pounds in a double team that force on your body. We're going to see those next steps being taken over the coming weeks. We can't tell with the defensive line yet. We don't know. And, it's true. I mean, football is I would call it a strange sport, a uniquely American sport. And the most important part of that sport are the either 8 or 9 men who line up in the trenches. If you are winning that, you're probably winning the game. Now, football has changed to the degree that you get it out to the perimeter even more now than you ever did, and it's very much closer to 7-on-7 than it was when some of us were growing up. But the line, if you cannot protect the quarterback, if you can just bat a ball down in a drive or get pressure, I mean, there's any number of ways to slow down a passing attack, mainly by completely shutting down the run, which we've seen Georgia do against pass-happy teams like Mississippi State, Tennessee to some degree. That's not necessarily the way they play, but the future at Georgia will be predicated on how well this defensive line plays. They don't have to be the 21 or 22 or even. I mean, this run defense was number 1 or 2 in the country for several years in a row. I'm not suggesting they got to be that. What I'm saying is if they're even better than they were a season ago, maybe not 113, but 95 yards on the ground allowed. That'd make a big difference. The other question mark I think coming out of this beginning part of camp is when is Jared Wilson going to be healthy enough to play in a meaningful way for the Dogs? And is it possible that Georgia can get where they want to go with Tate Ratledge as the center? So this is why I think this is not as big of a deal. Okay, part of football is injury. Tate Ratledge knows that well. In 2021, when he got hurt on, I think, the second or third play of the game against Clemson, but the first drive, he was gone for the season. And, he was a starting offensive lineman for them. You're going to lose guys. Now, keep in mind that season, Georgia lost these guys during the season at some point or whatever. Tate Ratledge, JT Daniels, George Pickens. You're going to have guys, exceptional players sometimes, in some cases, top 50 NFL draft picks. You're going to lose them, and you still need to figure out how to win national championships. They did that. They lost Adam Anderson, Tate Ratledge, JT Daniels, George Pickens. They had problems in 21 with injury. In 22, Jalen Carter didn't play for at least 5 games during the season. They lost Nolan Smith completely during that year. So, I mean, you're going to get guys hurt. With Wilson, when I look at the board, Georgia's got plenty of offensive linemen. That's not the issue. The question is, Wilson was going to be the starting center in theory for a reason. He's been banged up, so he's not been doing the full load at practice at all. And so when you get into these situations, it's, there's cause for concern. If he were rolling out there and there's no injuries to worry about or it's no big deal and all these things, fine, right? It wouldn't be something you concern yourself with. But he's not, and so people kind of wring their hands a little bit. I will say that, I watched Fernando Velasco go from guard to center. Georgia's been very fortunate to have a lot of centers through the years, whether you're talking about Ben Jones or David Andrews or Fernando or, they've just had a lot of really good centers in Lamont. So they've had guys that play that spot. Cedric Van Pran won 2 national championships and started like 46 games in a row or whatever it is, 48. So you have guys who are just really good at that spot. For Tate, I know they're going into what will be at least a top 3 defensive front when they play Clemson, but it gives Tate more tape. It gives him the ability to be flexible. I will rewind back to the national championship game against Alabama in 2021, where Warren Erickson was a starter for Georgia, but it was not working. Georgia was not getting where they wanted to go on the offensive line. Insert Broderick Jones all to the offensive line. Maybe Alabama had gotten worn out. Maybe they were. What Todd Monken was doing, he changed it. Maybe it was those things and the addition of Broderick at that time that pushed Georgia through into its first national championship in 41 years or whatever it was. You got to be able to be flexible and make change, and those things are going to be important for Georgia moving forward. Who are going to be the 5 guys on the offensive line? And we saw it with Xavier Truss. It's a guy that got his first start. I think a first start. We'll see. Someone can correct me, but at the end of the 20 season against Cincinnati, he had a hard time in that game, but he hung in there, and here we are. However many years later, Xavier Truss is one of the most dependable guys for Georgia on the offensive line. They need him, and they need him this season for sure. But you don't need to, they're healthy for now. except Wilson, it seems. And is it going to be that you get Wilson back out there? Do you get Bobo in there? You're going to have to, so the offensive line, you want options. You want options. There's not a lot of other like there that Georgia plays a difficult schedule. That's not that they can't control that in fall camp. All they can do is get ready for that during fall camp. All they can do is prepare their bodies and mentally stress themselves enough to where when they go to Texas, when they go to Alabama, when they open with Clemson, etc., that they're ready for those moments. The vast majority of this team is ready for the big time, but everyone's not. I do want to mention the younger guys just real quick. Again, make sure you're signing up for our newsletter. If you do not have our newsletter, it's free, and you're missing out on all this stuff coming to your mailbox. It's important because we're offering one, and you see this on the site, but you're getting $1. You can buy Dog Post for $1 until the Alabama game right now, and you're missing out on those options because you're not signed up for the newsletter. Do that right now. One other thing that's really important, I think, are the younger guys. I do want to point out, and I talked about this in what we were hearing earlier, the younger players that have stuck out so far, based on chatter and so forth, are, and now I can't find it quickly because when you try to talk and you try to read, that's very difficult. I would keep my eyes on these four guys. KJ, okay, so it's KJ Bolden, Nate Frazier, Ellis Robinson, and Justin Williams, who I've not talked a lot about because he's in a crowded linebacker situation. Those guys are all, KJ and Robinson are both defensive backs. They don't play the same position, but they're both DBs. I don't know that any of these guys are going to start. I would, at the beginning of the season, I would bet they will not start. Okay, I think that at secondary, you're going to see at safety, you're going to see Andrew. You're going to see Malachi Starks, and I always want to call Dan Jackson. I know this is strange. I always borderline call him Andrew Smart. I don't know why. But I think you're going to see Dan Jackson and Malachi Starks starting at safety. At corner and at star, I don't know that Ellis Robinson is going to start there. He may eventually start at a corner spot. I was talking with some Clemson folks. I think they feel like the Clemson folks, they feel like they're okay at receiver. They feel like they've got some playmaking receivers for the first time in a while. I think their hesitancy is they're really worried about quarterback. I mean, that's a real, like, they're sweating that out. And that's not a situation where you just plug a freshman in and all of a sudden it works. So there's concern at quarterback. The people that I talk to at Clemson do not think they will win that game. They think they need Georgia to make mistakes and make plural. But they do think they can be competitive. And I do too, for the record. I just don't know how competitive. Let me just look real quick because that game, that's such a curious game right now in the grand scheme of things. I think it's being undervalued in terms of its place in the world. It's still at 13 and a half, which I think is slightly low, to be honest with you. But I'm so excited for season. I really never last year was like catching my breath to get to this point of the year. I'm not like that at all. I think this is going to be an extremely fun year of college football, and I think that the start is fun immediately right off the bat. Clemson, Georgia, Miami, Florida, and then A&M and Notre Dame. That's a great weekend. And you got LSU, USC. That's a great weekend of college football. Those are fun games, and I think they will be a great kickoff to the season. Now that said, Georgia's got to get to the to kickoff, and that's what this time is about. We're only a week into this. We have 3 more weeks to go until we really see where Georgia's at. Thanks for watching. Sign up for the newsletter.